Yeah, dude, if you need an old guy to tell war stories from DeFi summer, I'm your guy.
Before we dive into the show, I want to share a bit about Altitude. Altitude is a global business account built on stablecoins, but fully connected to traditional fiat workflows. You get local banking details, international transfers, corporate cards, and free on and off ramps. For CFOs, stablecoins made payments faster, but slowed down everything else. Altitude changes this with invoicing, bill pay, 5% APY, and accounting integrations, all tied to your stablecoin treasury. I first met the team behind Altitude in 2021, and they were working on their first product, Squads Multisig. Fast forward to today, and Squads has become the default multisig on Solana, securing over $15 billion of value for over 450 teams. The team has brought the same level of rigor and thoughtfulness to Altitude, and I encourage all listeners to check it out. You can learn more in our show description below. John, appreciate you taking the time and coming in.
Sure, good to see you, Derek.
Just to get into it, Gauntlet does a lot of stuff these days. You guys are active in asset management. You're still active in risk. What's the best way to actually describe what Gauntlet is today?
I'd say what Gauntlet does is the same thing we've always been doing, which is we build financial models for crypto. We have a software platform for financial modeling for crypto and DeFi assets. Right now, there's two main applications of that. We have what we call applied research, where we build custom solutions for other protocols in the space. And then we also have our vaults, which are automated on-chain, basically investment products that allow anyone to pursue complex and profitable investment strategies on-chain, whether that's lending, market making, and perpetual exchanges. There's a variety of different strategies that we offer depending on your sort of risk and yield profile.
I think for people that are familiar with Gauntlet, like the evolution to what you guys are today, an asset manager makes sense, sort of starting off from the risk side, but you guys have been a few things over the years, right? Like starting off as mostly a DAO service provider, then really focusing like exclusively on risk as part of that.
Yeah.
Some other stuff along the way, and now sort of asset management. But at what point sort of were you guys like, hey, we should have a vaults product, we should focus on asset management? Like, is that something that sort of you guys got excited about sort of recently? What actually drove it?
Well, I guess one thing is, we were actually not first a DAO service provider, because when Gauntlet started in 2018, the DAO was a literal three-letter acronym, but a figurative four-letter word, because people only remember the DAO and the big hack and the split between Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. And so, this was coming out of the 2017 ICO craze, which was not great for investors. And so 2018 through 2020 bear market, we were actually, as I said earlier, always building financial models for crypto, that we worked on things like modeling consensus and attacks and the economic cost of things like DDoSing networks. So yeah, once again, we've always been building financial models for crypto. Of course, then when DeFi exploded, most DeFi protocols were run by DAOs, and we tailored our service offering to their needs. And so this was risk management, which we did for pretty much every major protocol in the space. We still work with Compound. We also still have work with Uniswap and Eigenlayer and others. But yeah, I think one thing that we noticed is when you're building software for other people and, not actually directly users on chain and things like that, the rubber doesn't always really hit the road with the efforts that you expend. So I think one example here is like with DAOs, we would build these really complex financial models that would stress test the entire loan book of Aave, for instance, the entire loan book of Compound. And then we'd put recommendations on chain. They would sit there for 7 to 14 days. And then all of a sudden, Compound would be updated to optimal conditions, which are 14 days old. And it's like most of Gauntlet comes from high frequency trading. We're mostly quants, former traders. I'm sort of the odd man out there coming from more of a tech background. But, I think it was always kind of painful to us that we would build these really complex systems that model things really accurately. And there was 2 weeks from when we would produce models to when those would be able to drive impact on chain. And I think the thing we saw with vaults is we were like, wow, we can do exactly what we're doing now, which is build financial models for crypto. except they will be plugged in live on chain, non-custodially, helping people optimize investment strategies. And it's sort of like the dream of what Gauntlet always was doing, which is taking models for high frequency trading and applying them to crypto. And hey, those help a little bit when you're modeling things like DDoS attacks and tokenomics. But when you're modeling actually doing trading and other optimizations on chain, then it's really, you're delivering a lot more value, a lot more directly.
How has that changed your day-to-day and what the company's sort of like general philosophy is? Because the asset management business, it's something where you need to not just have your strategy, you need to fundraise for it. You need to talk externally about it. You need to raise capital from the right folks. Compare that to what you guys before, which is sort of working very closely with protocol teams, sort of directly behind the scenes. Now it's like maybe a mix of both of those things. Sort of, how have you guys adapted? How have you adapted?
Certainly, you are fostering and developing more relationships with asset allocators, whether they be funds or high net worth individuals. I do think though that like we always tried to have those conversations because of course, when we worked on Compound or something like that, the things that we do on Compound affect Compound's users. And we would always try to talk to them too, to understand, hey, of course we want to mitigate risk, but the easiest way to mitigate risk is just make some product totally unusable, right? Like, we could take all the risk down in every lending market if you just stop lending on assets. It's obviously kind of tautological, but like, it's one of those things where, you're trying to balance, right? Risk management is about balancing risk and reward, not only mitigating risks. So, I think, we certainly are talking to people investing on chain quite a bit more. And I think also it's operationally more burdensome where we used to have on call and kind of rarely get woken up in the middle of the night for things like liquidity crunches and various lending protocols. But now, we have a trading team in Singapore, invested a ton into security, tons of automation to make sure that, we're doing everything we can to keep users' funds safe with the best in class security practices, things like that. So yeah, just the more you're doing, the more you're doing on chain, the higher the risks are. And so yeah, that has sort of changed how we operate the company. But it's become a little more 24/7. But yeah, it is, as I mentioned earlier, just a natural extension of what we've always been doing and sort of the team that we built out over the past 7 years.
And has that, it sounds like that's sort of this change in sort of becoming more of an asset manager. It's also maybe impacted sort of how you guys have hired. Like you have the trading team in Singapore now for global coverage, I'm assuming around the clock. You started off as mostly, as you said, quants, like you're the odd man out from a tech background. Like, have you brought in more folks from like a sort of trading desks sort of background or still mostly quant focused?
We've always hired a blend of data scientists, traders, and engineers. I love traders. I think they understand the market and, in a way that most people who haven't just like, managed a book, it's just very cutthroat. And you just have to be like extremely paranoid, I think, to be a great trader. But it's one of those things like, there's some things I think traders are better at than anyone in the world. Now, I would say one thing about traders is a lot of times they're trying to build stuff that works. They know that their edge is going to get squeezed out fairly quickly. And so, when it comes down to say, hey, if we're trying to build something it's not just the best strategy right now, but how do we build software that makes us faster at building vaults in the future? Then people from tech, people like quants and data scientists and things like that, they can really balance out that skill set. So we have great knowledge of just how to win in markets and then great knowledge on how to scale. And, the company and our product roadmap, they meet somewhere in the middle.
So it's less like, hey, how do we make discretionary trading decisions at a moment in time that help our vault's performance? It's more, how do we create systems that sort of scale better over time, perform better over a period of time in a sustainable way?
Yeah, I'd say, you said discretionary decisions and you also said asset management earlier. And I kind of let those things slide because I do think that, we're in a different regulatory environment now. And so I'm not going to like just mince words all the time.
Push back,
but
please.
I will say, so the one thing is we're not asset managers.
Yeah.
we build automated vaults. We'll do things like, go through and analyze an asset and be like, hey, is this like meet the criteria that we would need it to meet to be included, for instance, as collateral on a protocol or collateral that one of our vaults are going to lend against. But that's like the great thing about vaults and why I think they're the future of finance and why I think they, have some huge advantages over traditional investment vehicles like funds or ETFs or things like that. So yeah, I guess like in the end, it's, hey, we're not doing asset management. We're doing what I would consider the future of asset management. And there's a lot of big differences. One, we're not making very many discretionary decisions, if any. Everything we're doing is automated and relying on automation. And I think that's sort of an advantage, right? We have automated systems that will detect if liquidity dries up for a token and try to start automatically rebalancing out of these positions. Of course, we have a team of people that are watching all this happen, shipping fixes, that sort of thing over time. But yeah, it really has some real advantages to, trading traditional assets and traditional markets.
You mentioned that you see this as the future of how people will manage funds, sort of this vault-based structure. What do you think's still missing today? Where like in 2 years, in 5 years, like there's going to continue to be sort of innovation for not just what you're building, but for any kind of on-chain sort of fund management yield strategies. Like, what do you think hasn't been built or isn't widely used today that will gain adoption in the next few years?
I'll look at it from two different sort of angles here. So one from just looking at it as a user experience of using vaults, and then another is sort of, hey, what things do we want vaults to do that they're not doing now? As far as user experience goes, it's just difficult to like invest USDC in a vault for most people. Maybe you can use like, there's a couple fintech apps that have integrated our vaults and things like that. However, if you have to go like sign up for Coinbase, get USDC, send it to a wallet, look at the thousands of different vaults in crypto and try to pick the right one for you, deal with things like bridging, right? You're like, oh, I want to invest in this vault on Base and I have USDC, but it's not Base USDC. Like, there's way too much of the implementation leaking into the user experience in crypto. And so I think that's the thing that's going to change over the next 5 years, I think the most, which is these things are valuable to provide better yield than other comparable options today. The experience of using them is not even close. It's way worse than just clicking a button in my Schwab account for most users. And so I think that's one thing that we'll have to fix is help people onboard to these systems, build things like one thing that Gauntlet has worked a lot on is building things like cross-chain vaults that abstract away all the underlying L1s, L2s, bridging, et cetera, so that there's a better user experience and people who just want yield and want to automate yield generation for themselves using our tools are able to do so without worrying too much about, bridge times and allocating liquidity across different pools, right? So, crypto, it's a really open system. And so there's lots of different options for users. And I think we're trying to make that simple for people. On the second end of this, where you say, hey, what do we want vaults to do that they're not doing right now? Especially as you see rates compress and basically spreads close in DeFi where, you can borrow against Bitcoin with pretty decent LTVs at around treasury rates right now. I think one thing that's going to make crypto stronger is incorporating real world assets. And I know people have been talking about real world assets for years. It's like 10, 20, $30 billion of real world assets on chain. And everyone's like, oh, it's like, it's finally here. It's finally here.
Borrow against your home on chain.
Yeah. Actually, someone who was looking to actually refinance their mortgage recently as rates have been dropping. There is room for innovation in that market, but I don't know how much blockchain helps. I think there's like regulatory and other restrictions that are probably the main things in that market. But the one thing I am excited about are things like private credit, things like money market funds. One thing that I think everyone in crypto has been trying to do is they're trying to onboard traditional financial capital into crypto markets. And they say, hey, look, you can earn 10% yield on chain and it's really low risk. And sometimes I think that's actually sort of true. But when you talk to someone from a large traditional financial institution and you're like, yes, 10% yield and it's low risk, they're like, this guy is like this guy's like Bernie Madoff. This guy is scamming. I do not believe you. Why isn't everyone else invested yet? And so there's this thing, which is, there's this big trust barrier to get over before they're going to put their money at risk on chain. Now, I think that's a much larger trust barrier to get over than hey, what if we just actually, if you tokenize your assets, we'll get people to buy them on chain, right? If they're like, generally less scrutiny goes into who's buying assets at these large financial institutions than what assets they're investing in. They have fiduciary duty to most of their customers, right? So I think that people say it's a bear market right now, spreads are compressed. I think it's actually a great opportunity to onboard TradFi to crypto because there's money in crypto that would be better served investing in things like tokenized private credit than many of the yield generation opportunities on chain.
What are your thoughts on the state of DeFi overall? I can tell you sort of in my position and a lot a
give me a straw man I can cut down here.
I think a lot of people in the industry feel like DeFi is sort of at a position where there isn't much step function or new innovation in general. Like there's been like in the past, call it 2-3 years, like obviously Athena's model sort of took off and was successful. Yeah. And there's like a lot of folks sort of taking elements of that and innovating. The large sort of legacy protocols they're still doing stuff. They're still making changes. Some of them are profitable, but I don't talk to many folks who are like, when I ask them, what are you most excited for these days? They're like some brand new DeFi thing or whatever. I guess in your shoes, like you've seen the evolution of DeFi. You've spoken to every generation of these. You talk to new ones that are building stuff. Do you think that's like a fair sort of assessment of where things stand, where it's like, hey, there's still stuff happening, there's still stuff changing, but there's not as much like just step function change, maybe?
Sounds like you're talking to a lot of VCs, actually.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah.
Because I will say the market to invest in crypto has really changed. If you look at it from an investment opportunity, which many users of crypto basically do, a lot of retail crypto users are just people buying meme coins, right? And I don't know if that's investing in like the J. Pierpont Morgan sense, but it's certainly sending money somewhere. And so I think that, yes, a lot of people look at it like as an investment. And I think people were really excited about Bitcoin and then Ethereum, and they just wanted more Ethereums. And it turns out actually like there's just not an opportunity to do that. Or like there's just not that many things that have like, or that this technology is going to unlock step change progress for. And I think one thing with DeFi is DeFi has just got an incredible product market fit. Every major financial institution has a plan to start onboarding DeFi and using crypto and using crypto rails. And so the way I look at it is, hey, like the products have gotten better, right? In 2020, I was farming pickles and yams. And while that was very fun, that's not like real stuff, right? And it's not like, I can't put like 10% of my net worth into a pickle farm. Or sorry, I'm not going to do that again.
You personally, some people will.
I'm definitely not doing that again. But the one thing is that like, but I can't put 10% of net worth into a whole variety of on-chain assets now. So the space has matured. And so it's like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if everyone just had some magic idea and everyone was Vitalik and then VCs were going to make out like bandits every time. And it's just that like innovation's hard. And I think that, the market has really matured. And that's tough for people that were investors in the 2019 to 2023 period where people were just making tons of money. And now they have to find like, they have to really find the needle in the haystack, real innovation. So yeah, I think it's one of those things too, is that, there was this explosion of crypto companies and crypto ideas and people really were excited about new stuff. But in the end, like, there's not that many new problems that have come up in the past 5-10 years. We should be solving real existing problems, right? And that's one thing I think DeFi does, is it has a lot of advantages over the traditional financial ecosystem.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. I think the era of like 2020, 2022 sort of invest in a new DeFi app on XYZ chain, make some small tweak to the curve, like, and sort of token does incredibly well. Like that's been over for a while. And like, there's now a few, like 5 to 10 protocols that are doing really well, continuing to innovate and bring the space forward. Do you think some of those protocols, and we can name some like Uniswap, Aave, Compound, MakerDAO. Like there's a few others I'm not saying, but do you think those protocols generally are at a place where they've done enough where they can maintain their position? Like, do you think disrupting those protocols is still possible? Because again, I think
I'm kind of trying right now.
Yeah,
in this sense, right? Like, so we work really closely with Morpho. Morpho's a direct competitor to Aave. And I think Morpho's it provides a lot of functionality that gives it advantages over Aave in some way. Now, it is hard to disrupt these players that have been in the industry for a long time that have amassed huge liquidity moats, right? So, I think, I'll give Aave some credit, which is if I need to go borrow $200 million of USDC today, I think it would happen a little faster in Aave than it would in any other lending market. But, Aave also hasn't really released a major update in a long time. There's all sorts of things that other protocols have done to isolate risk, pool liquidity, do things like implement vault models that allow you to optimize more frequently. There's all sorts of things there that are going to give those protocols like Morpho an advantage. And so, I will say one thing is like, for any startup, I don't think the right number of competitors to have is 0. If you have a new idea, you're going to have 0 competitors, but you also could be totally out to sea. And I will say, Aave has a huge user base of people paying them hundreds of millions of dollars a year in interest and fees. And it's because what Aave does is valuable. And if someone comes in like Morpho and it's like, I can do a better job, that's probably a better startup idea than like all of the crazy like crypto gaming things or like, all the other long tail crypto ideas. So I don't know. I think having competitors is good. Markets are crowded for a reason.
On the note of Aave, you guys obviously were involved for Aave for a long time, many years, if I recall. I've seen sort of shots on Twitter from both sides. Yeah. From folks at Gauntlet, from folks at Aave. It felt like
I thought it was kind of playful for a little while, but it got a little nasty from time to time. I don't know. I thought it was all in good fun, but
what was like the genesis of that? Was there like some specific sort of incidents or just like not clash of working styles?
So, I think
personalities.
I think this is for the most part, I don't try to bring up sort of issues we've had with anyone who's ever paid us, right? I feel like, when we left Aave, we just said, hey, this isn't for us anymore. And, we didn't really explain very much. And so we just thought, hey, we don't need to air out any dirty laundry. However, this is certain members of the Aave community's favorite thing to do, right? And so I think over the years, Aave, after we left, they started to say some negative things about us publicly, and we tried to ignore it. But then over time, we just were like, hey, if it's going to be like this, like I think it makes sense for us to sort of clarify when they're saying things that are totally misleading. And so I think what happened at one point is that Stani or someone from Aave impugned the level of effort that we had put into our work on Aave, which, so many members of our team had stayed up till like the middle of the night, helping them with war rooms, things like that. And I think that there's some kind of playful barbs sent back and forth there. But yeah, I think this is one of the issues with a community like Aave's, where, I think one of the managers in Aave, Emilio, said this about Mark Zeller, who's one of the big voices in the Aave community. And he said, there's no situation or no internal disagreement that Mark wouldn't make public for internet clout. And sadly, this has actually really made Aave a really negative place to work. And it's a really hard DAO to work in because you have people who are trying, like normally when you're working with someone, you hope that if they feedback for you, they give it privately. And you actively have people in the Aave community that are trying to just like complain in the forums to sort of garner favor. And so this has really not worked out for the Aave community recently, where there's disagreement around sort of ownership of IP, the way that revenue flows for partnerships is attributed to either the labs company, Avara, or the DAO. And so this has been a big, like kind of public meltdown for them, where like the major voices in the DAO are accusing Stani, the CEO of Aave, of impropriety. And it's just like, yeah, I don't know. So that is, it's just kind of par for the course if you're working in Aave, that there'll be a big public fight. And, we've always tried to avoid it. And, I wasn't, that one weekend, I maybe should have bit my tongue a little bit more. But I decided to chirp back a little bit.
No, I think it's good little drama never hurts anybody.
I thought it was funny, but I'll be honest, sometimes you run into those people in person, you wave and they just look at their shoes and you're like, oh dude, I thought we were cool. Like, maybe not.
If you were in, like, if you had skin in the game in Aave and it was up to you.
I do have skin in the game in Aave.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I first of all, before we worked for Aave, I was an investor in the Lend token, which was before Aave was Aave.
That's before the transfer.
It was ETH Lend, and you could trade in your Lend tokens. I think it was 100 to 1 or 1 to 100. I can't remember.
The conversion.
There was a conversion rate. You can convert it to Aave, and I still have some of my Aave tokens. I mean, I think I own a small amount of tokens in almost every major DeFi protocol because I'm long DeFi. But I do have skin in the game in Aave. Also because it's just kind of fun to say in moments like these as well.
So do you vote on? You don't do.
I think I have 17 Aave, so I don't think I'm showing up in the. It's like around there order of magnitude, right? So I don't think I'm showing up in the voter tallies.
We touched on this earlier, but the conflict in the Aave DAO now, it's like Stani on one hand, sort of positioned against the DAO, which is Mark Zeller, Emilio, BGD, like maybe a few others. I don't know that it's like an either or sort of situation, but it kind of on the outside appears like both want to continue developing their own visions for Aave.
Yeah.
And where the revenue goes ultimately sort of it's downstream of that. Like, who do you think should build Aave? Is it possible to have both? Like, it's a tricky situation.
Well, I think it's totally self-inflicted. I mean, there's nothing inherently disorganized about DAOs. However, I think many DAO participants conflate disorganization with decentralization. And so they're like, oh, we need a bunch of different teams doing separate things. And one team is going to run growth and another team is going to run product and do marketing and update the protocol and things like that. And what this means is a lot of DAOs just lack a coherent vision. And so I think in some situations you'll have people, like, for instance, Maker is an interesting one where Rune comes back. He also owns a ton of the Maker token, which helps because you can kind of throw that around in the end. But at the very least, like, Rune's kind of in charge. And so what Maker and I guess Sky is doing, I mean, it'll always be Maker to me, but what they're doing, I think there's at least some leadership there where I think in the effort of centralization, protocols like Aave were unable to sort of get clear leadership. And now they have a very fractured vision for what's next. And as someone who uses DeFi, and I really don't want Aave to get hacked, even though we compete with them, it would just be so bad for DeFi if they got hacked. I don't want anyone in DeFi to lose their money, but it's one of those things like you just kind of have to worry about the protocol when you know that the team building it lacks leadership. There is ongoing operation that you need to make sure this protocol works effectively. Things like delisting assets, managing risk over time. And, Aave, like, there's never enough cooks in the kitchen over there. They have 2 risk managers who are like arguing in the forums about which parameters they should put on chain once again in 2 weeks, right? So I think that like a lot of the DAO culture was kind of counterproductive. And obviously the shining example of this, they should be crushing everyone else. And they're slowly losing market share because they lack leadership. They're operationally hamstrung by the DAO. And yeah, everything they do is like a public meltdown and fight. So I find that very unenviable. And I wish them the best of luck.
It does seem like the emphasis on decentralization and sort of having multiple contributors, like that was sort of a function of the regulatory environment at the time.
But Aave was in the EU, right? Like, I don't think they were ever as much in the crosshairs of regulators as someone like Uniswap was. So, I mean, I honestly, like, I think everyone who ever worked with Uniswap, including the blockchain clubs, got subpoenaed by the NYSEG because, I mean, that was a crazy witch hunt. Don't get me started about that. Because there's just every major regulatory body in the US was looking into Uniswap at one point. And then, of course, they all dropped their charges because Uniswap is a software development company. And honestly, it's funny. I don't even think Uniswap was charged with very much. There's all lots of investigations, and none of them went anywhere, which was, I think, just emblematic of how anti-crypto the Gensler regime, and also just generally the government was until, a little over a year ago.
What do you think of the current sort of administration's sort of actions and stance on crypto? On the one hand, it's been, I guess, yeah, I'll pause there. Yeah, it's a big question.
It's great to be working under a regime where there's room for innovation. They don't think everything is inherently bad because it's crypto. I used to always joke that working in crypto reminds me of the sword of Damocles. If you remember this old parable.
It's hanging over your head.
Yeah, so that Damocles, he gets to spend one day on Dionysus's throne. I think it's Dionysus, but we can fix this in post. Just AI the right Greek king over my mouth later. But Dionysus is like, hey, if you actually want to know what it's like to be king, we're gonna hang a sword with a single horse's hair holding it above your head. And so you can feel that, hey, while you have all this power as king, someone could kill you at any time. And I would say working in crypto was just like that situation, except it was not a horse's hair holding the knife or the sword away from our heads. It was the sword was in Gary Gensler's hand, and he was actively stabbing us for 4 years.
He's personally coming to your home, actually, to check up on you.
No. So yeah, I don't think that was great. I will say, like, I don't know if the Trump coin is a great idea for anybody. I don't really know how that's going to work out for the people involved. But that being said, if you could say, hey, John, would you rather have Trump coin and the new SEC regime that permits innovation, or the old thing? I think I'd take the good with the bad.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good way to frame it. I think, unfortunately, we have had like the two coming together. Like it's a bit hard to separate. Like sometimes I wish we could just have sort of prudent regulation that doesn't sort of have this sort of Damocles, but also not sort of a Trump coin necessarily. But it is what it is. So
yeah, it is. Also, like, do you also had a Melania coin too?
Yeah. That's still a thing.
I was always wondering, did they release both of those, or did someone just really quickly be like, launch a Trump coin? I'm going to throw Melania one out right afterwards.
I don't know the full story. I'm forgetting, but I think it was the same people that launched Trump coin.
Okay.
And like soon they saw it doing well. They saw an opportunity, like, hey, we might get the rest of the first family.
Yeah.
And I think if those had continued to do well, like, we probably would have seen.
I mean, Baron coin would have pumped. Obviously, Baron coin would have pumped.
Baron coin would
have pumped Baron coin. He's on Pump.fun. That's yeah. He's out there.
No, it's true. Yeah. And I guess, like, moving back to your business a little bit.
Yeah.
How has all this sort of impacted you guys? Because obviously that means, like, this friendlier regulatory regime and just continued innovation in DeFi, it makes it easier for some of the fintechs to get involved in DeFi. These folks have huge distribution channels. They're trying to provide access themselves. They're trying to work with folks like you guys to sort of provide that access. What have those conversations actually been like? Sort of, what are they looking for from partners? Are you ever worried that, like, they might try to maybe build without someone like a Gauntlet sort of providing the service, like trying to do something in-house as opposed to partnering?
Worried, not really. I mean, we've been doing this for 7 years, building things like USD yield strategies on chain is complicated. And there are some very sharp corners you do not want to bump your head on. And so I think that it does take a lot of experience. You have to know these markets to build strategies that work and meet your risk profile over time. And I think certainly some people will try. But yeah, we've built software the past 7 years that's going to make it way easier for them to do so. And I think it's on us to make a case to all of these newcomers to crypto. We need to make a case on how our platform is better and what this enables for them. So, we've been in feature development for, as I said, 7 years. I think we have a few things that they're going to find useful. From our conversations with many of these fintechs, and I wish I could share more because we've had quite a few of them, but I'll let the marketing team announce any partnerships. I think it's really interesting how, the crypto programs that these companies and the crypto product initiatives start. It's just you have a couple of people at these companies that get sort of crypto pilled and get really excited about it. They make the internal pitch, they build with these teams, and they start trying to find use cases where crypto can help. And so, I think in Robinhood, they announced this thing like maybe it was like 6 months ago, but they were already using crypto for overnight settlement. And this is just because people passionate about it. It seemed like a better technology for this one use case. And now over time, I think Robinhood's announced that they're building their own chain and things like that. So you see these programs grow. And so when we always talk to these companies, you're like, oh, I'm going to go talk to some fintech, and you've never seen them say anything about crypto. But when you go talk to the people there that are actually working on this stuff, they're all like, total degens who have been obsessed with crypto for years and are excited to finally align the professional and personal interests, and build crypto into these fintechs. So I've been pleasantly surprised with how much these people really know about crypto, even though their companies themselves are maybe less educated. And I think it'll be a slow process, but we're well underway. And there's a lot of exciting new crypto basically backed fintech features and products coming out. So
if a new founder comes to you, like let's call it seed or series A or whatever, and they're building in DeFi, they want to get like real traction, they want to eventually launch a token that sort of has a good model, launches effectively, like where would you point them to? Like outside of sort of maybe working with you guys, sort of are there other examples of teams that you've worked with where you're like, these guys did it well, these guys built their product in the right way? Any favorite customers in experience?
I mean, I think MakerDAO is cool. One thing about them is that their thing is we want anyone in the world to have access to basically stable currency. And I think that we're pretty successful in that, and that like kind of anyone can go get DAI or SUSD or whatever they're calling it now.
I don't know what it's called.
The thing is, I actually I don't know. I remember reading the Maker Purple paper. Like, I have pretty good knowledge of how Maker used to work, and I'm just less up on the Sky ecosystem. But they're doing some cool stuff over there. That being said, one project I think I can speak highly of is Uniswap, and not everything Uniswap has done has been a success. However, they've done two things which I think are pretty good. So one, they're focused on enabling trading. Uniswap has always been about trading, and they haven't done a bunch of other stuff, right? And I think it's hard to focus, but they're like, hey, we're building technology that makes it easier to trade. And Uniswap v2, huge improvement over v1, allowed multiple assets. Uni v3 allowed for much better liquidity provision and much more efficient market making, right? And v4 allows for all these integrations. Unichain allows for pool liquidity, right? Not all these things has been a runaway success. However, they have a clear focus, and they're trying to make a better experience for their users. And so I think that, something more crypto companies could really learn from. And then secondly, on top of that, Uniswap, they released that token with a gun to their head. Like, SushiSwap was going to take all of their liquidity, if you remember this, in 2020. And all of a sudden, like, guess what, we're doing Uni token too. They did a quick airdrop farm, released the token. And I think that there was a lot of questions like, what is this going to have to do with the protocol? Like, and over time, I think they've done a lot to say, hey, we're going to want to eventually direct revenues to the protocol. It took them years to figure out the whole fee switch thing. And also, they have aligned the teams working for Uniswap, right? So Uniswap Labs and the foundation are, they announced a little while ago that they're merging. And so I think that, hey, they're in a position to have just much better ownership and leadership in Uniswap. And in doing so, just a much clearer and simpler connection between all the work people are doing and any potential value driven to the token. So I think on the product side and the token side, it should tremendous focus on the product side and on the token side, even though I don't think anyone on the Uniswap team was like, there's probably a lot of things they would do differently with the token launch. They've continually done a better job for Uni holders over the years. So,
yeah, I agree. With Uniswap, it does seem like it took a little while for them to sort of figure that path out for token value accrual and alignment. But again, I think you can give them a little bit of slack, just given how much they had to deal with from regulators.
No one was harangued more by regulators. So yeah, I definitely giving them some slack there, because there are some moments where we were like, ooh, this token, I'm not sure what's going on here. But I think they've made insane progress since then. So
sounds like you're a big uni holder as well. So
I have a little bit of every DeFi protocol.
Yams too?
Dude, I think I have one YAM, because because when at one point you had to like turn in your YAMs to save the YAM protocol or something, because there was some smart contract bug. I mean, we could get into details of this, but no. So I think I saved one YAM. It's sort of like an NFT, where it's like, I was in there at that time. It's my crypto OG NFT, but it's just a YAM token. So
it does seem like there's been way less just exploits and like black swan events in DeFi generally. I haven't tracked the numbers closely, but just that's what it feels like. Yeah. Is that, like, curious what your just read of the past few years is on that?
Definitely feels like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also haven't tracked this. Maybe the good folks at rec.com have a little graph they can provide.
Well, I'm not seeing them come up as much on my feed, which probably means that we're right.
Yes. Though I will say there was the one, what was that?
The balancer?
No, Bybit.
Okay, yeah.
Didn't Bybit get hacked for $1.5 billion?
They got hacked for a bit. But that's more of like a centralized exchange security exploit.
It's regular computer security exploit.
Right, exactly.
Now, I will say, like, it's really hard to steal $1.5 billion from a bank, because people just be like, there's identity and tracking and stuff. So this is still kind of a crypto problem and a big part of crypto security. Crypto rails are part of crypto as much as sort of, laser eyes and in Ethereum maximalists would they tell you, oh, it's not crypto if it's not on chain. It's like, well, how are you gonna get the money on chain, dude? It's part of that on ramp is part of it. So I will say, though, the thing is, it's like we're saying, oh, there's less hacks, though. I think that hack was like, I think it was like 11% of North Korea's GDP. So
I saw something where like North Korea made more from crypto exploits than their like domestic, I don't know if it's GDP, but like their domestic industries were like small relative to the billions that they made from exploits, which explains why they invested so many resources.
Yeah, they have. I mean, I don't know a lot about North Korea, but I don't think they have a particularly well-functioning economy. And while I laugh at the North Korea thing, it's just so crazy how large a percentage of their GDP it is. Obviously, that's a huge problem for the space. And so yeah, I think over time we have less hacks, getting better at doing things like creating solutions that balance things like sanctions and other concerns with product goals and things like that. So it feels like we have less hacks, less like just totally preventable reentrancy attacks and things like that, for sure. But I mean, like the Bybit hack or something like that would have been extremely hard to prevent. I mean, it's their job to, but yeah, the amount of checking you have to do to make sure that, you have the right version of the browser, the right version of the wallet. Someone hasn't injected some, HTML or JavaScript or something onto the Gnosis safe page when you're signing. Like, there's just so many attack vectors, and it's a very high value attack. And so, yeah, it's crypto security is always hard. So, I mean, we just stay insanely paranoid at Gauntlet. That's sort of a big part of it. And have luckily mostly been able to avoid most of those issues.
Any other major pet peeves that you have in crypto? Like when you're just like sitting at home or in the office, like looking at CT and you see like certain tweets or certain things come up, like, does anything drive you crazy? It could be like I don't know if you like hate meme coins or something, or if you find some protocols sort of annoying, like anything along those lines where you just have pet peeves that you like to rant about.
I don't trade a lot of meme coins, but I'm sort of happy for other people to do that. I think a lot of times probably better things to do with your money, but I don't have a problem with people having fun.
Yeah.
I will say I use bridges all the time, and I hate bridging tokens. So that is one of my pet peeves. I hate bridges. Yeah, I took the battery tunnel here from Brooklyn. I didn't even take the
So you
Brooklyn
hate
Bridge.
all, you hate all kinds of bridges. Yeah.
It is actually bleeding over into my life.
Yeah,
No, but no, bridging. I think the UX is terrible, and yeah, it's just annoying. Like, I don't want to have to think about that.
And in terms of like your information diet and just sort of what your actual day-to-day looks like, sort of how do you do it? Because you're managing, helping manage, I don't know how big Gauntlet is now,
About
but
70 people.
70-person sort of team, interacting with like customers, still needing to stay up to date on sort of what is happening in the industry. Like, what do you do? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you like read blog posts? Do you just CT? Like, how do you stay up to date?
Yeah, definitely a little bit of podcasts, because that's just really easy to do, and like on the subway or something like that. And occasionally though, interviews and things like that are very pertinent to me. For the most part, though, it is crypto Twitter. Follow people that are following the market, and also I think just like you got to use a lot of protocols, right? So last year, for instance, one protocol I was using Jupiter a lot. And if you're using Jupiter, you're gonna be like, okay, well, what is this new coin that's trading in Jupiter? And you're gonna go look it up, right? And so you just have to use as many products as you can. And so I recently was using Lighter. And like, it actually just helped me realize, hey, how much innovation there's been, and not just on Lighter. I'm not some Lighter shill. Hyperliquid has done this as well, but how much innovation there's been on liquidity provisioning in perp dexes, and how the user experience is so much better. So yeah, I think that like, if you want to know the trends, you have to be living them. And so we encourage everyone at Gauntlet to use DeFi pretty aggressively.
So you have at Gauntlet all these sort of super smart people, quants, data scientists, traders. You're working on a bunch of different protocols. I'm sure disagreement sort of happens a lot, and there's like healthy discussion. What does that look like? Sort of, do you like have how do decisions get made? Do you have like sort of like when you decide, hey, how much do we invest in this protocol versus that one? Should we deploy engineering resources to this ecosystem? Like, are we excited as a company about it? Sort of, is it people like fighting to get their deal done over others? Like, sort of, what does that look like?
I don't want to sound like I'm doing a verbal LinkedIn post, but I'll risk it. There are two values that we have at Gauntlet that I think impact a lot, or impact profoundly how we make decisions. So the first one is ownership. If someone's on my team and they own a product or something like that, they'll get feedback from me all day. Some of that feedback is going to be very aggressive. They'll also get feedback from key technical stakeholders like CTO, engineers, et cetera. But a lot of times they own those decisions, right? And they will have to live and die by them. And I think that creates a really strong sense of responsibility. It makes, working Gauntlet a place where you're motivated because you actually do have control. You do have impact. However, with that power comes great responsibility, and we will hold you accountable for how these decisions go. And so I think it starts with ownership. The other thing too is, another value we have is you need to be honest even when it's not easy. And so I would say this rarely involves a lot of like yelling when we're making decisions.
Sometimes though.
Sometimes it does. Mostly my fault, to be honest. You have a culture of healthy confrontation. People get used to it, right? But that allows us to sort of, drive the right decisions. And when people do have ownership, they can be sure that everyone else has sort of provided as much feedback to the extent that it's helpful as possible. So I think those are the ways that we deal with that.
I spoke to some friends of mine who've worked with you at Gauntlet, and they said I had to ask about your truck. Like, apparently you drive a 1980s sort of.
I'm wearing a Ford hat too. I have a 94 F-150, 1994 F-150 XLT Super Cab in Tuscan bronze. People say it's gold. No, that's Tuscan bronze.
You're just a big truck guy? Like,
I just always like cars. I live deep up into Brooklyn that I have a garage, so it's just a fun hobby. Yeah.
Nice. Is it hard to drive it in the city?
It's not hard to drive in the city. It's hard to park it. Like, I took a cab here.
Oh, you took a cab. Okay.
I took a cab here, right? Because it's like parking, and this part of Manhattan is pretty tough. So, no, I just like trucks.
That's perfectly
Dude,
rational.
I'll tell you, man, when I was a little kid, my three favorite things were trucks, chocolate milk, and my mom. And now that I'm 37, I think that was a pretty good list.
That's a really
good list.
Yeah.
Now we call chocolate milk mochas, right? You put a little shot of espresso in there, you're a sophisticated adult. Take the shot of espresso out, then you're just some child drinking chocolate milk.
I think we should bring back people just drinking chocolate milk alone.
Dude,
right?
The milk industry tried. They used to do all these.
They tried? Okay.
They did have a bunch of advertisements featuring Al Horford when he was on the Celtics. Al Horford was sponsored by chocolate milk.
So do they have like the Gauntlet milk ads, but with brown chocolate milk over instead of the normal milk?
Yes, and then Al Horford very slowly crossing people up. But I mean, milk is probably pretty good for you, though. It's like high protein. Everyone's into protein shakes these days. So yeah, I think we're ready for a chocolate milk comeback.
Love it. Well, John, thank you for taking the time. And
yeah, dude, good to see you again, man.
Great to see you.